All right, guys, thanks for joining us. This episode, we are going to be talking about a movie that I've wanted to do for a long time on this show. I know it's one of the ones that me and Mark had talked about when we first started doing this, but it's just one of those ones that never made it for one reason or another, which is fine. And I know we've talked about it before while we're recording. I went back through and was trying to see if it had ever made it, at least into the show notes that we talked about it a little bit. But we were talking about the 1979 horror movie Phantasm. And this is one of my first horror movies that I ever remember seeing. And it's been a favorite of mine since I was a little kid. So that's why I wanted to get it onto the show. And I know it's one of the ones that when we talk about a lot on this show, me and Mark watching, the two of us watching stuff, you know, over at your house and after school or on the weekends or whatever. And this was one of the ones that I don't think we ever saw together and probably never even really talked about when we were younger.
I didn't see this until maybe 2 or 3 years ago for the first time. So I remember my memory of Phantasm was actually the sequel. There was a trailer trailer that was going on for the sequel that they kept playing over and over again at the beginning of videos that you would rent back then. And I think it was like in the late 80s. And so I remember hearing Phantasm 2, and then they showed the tall man and then the sphere and all of that. And I had no idea what it was about or that there was even a first movie, because I had no idea about this. But my take on it at that point was that whatever it must have been, I think this was like at the height of the slasher craze and, the late 80s when the sequel came out for Phantasm. My take was that there must have been some original movie, and then they realized, we could turn it into a franchise because, Freddy Krueger's big and Jason's big and all the, let's turn this Undertaker guy into the next like Freddy Krueger. And his, shtick is the sphere and all of that. So, yeah, I didn't really have much of an interest in it, to be honest with you. And that was like, gosh, the second one was like 87, 88 or something like that. That was kind of like the height of the slasher craze.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, I believe Phantasm 2 came out in 1988. When I first saw this one, and this is maybe a repeat of a story I've told before on this show. My mom's side of the family, we do family reunion every summer, and we used to do family reunion at Turkey Run, which is a state park in Indiana. And Turkey Run has these little cabin things that you can stay in, and then they have like a lodge. And most of the family used to always rent out a bunch of the cabins. And the cabins, basically what they were is a cabin had 2 rooms on it, which were essentially hotel rooms. And there was 2 of them per cabin. And so when we would rent it out, we'd usually be sharing a cabin with somebody else. Or maybe there was 4 on some of them even. But anyway, my family would have all their kids there and then all the grown-ups. And when I was younger, and I don't remember how old I was when this happened, but the grown-ups would always play cards at night and then sit around and pretty much drink all night. And so the kids would end up in different people's cabins or lodge rooms and usually just like watching movies or something. And me and my cousin, who is a year older than me, and I can't remember if our brothers were with us or not, but me and him ended up in a room, and we were flipping through the channels and stuff, and there was this movie on, and there was the scene in the movie where Michael cuts off the tall man's fingers, and then he picks up one of the fingers on the ground and he puts it in the box. And then a little bit later in the movie, he gives the box to Jody so Jody could see the finger to prove that he's not lying. And the only thing I remember about watching it when we were that night was Jody opens the box and there's this finger twitching in the box in what now to me looks like mustard. But back then, however old I was, 10 or 8 or 11 or whatever I was, that's really stuck with me. And it was one of those things where I saw it and I didn't realize what it was until probably a few years later when I saw it again somewhere. And then I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. But ever since I was like probably a teenager at least, Phantasm has been one of those movies that I've just loved. And I don't know if it kind of goes along with other things that I like that other people don't really seem to know about. But I know for a long time, like, Phantasm was one of those things where, you know, even if you're talking to other horror fans and you bring up, oh yeah, that movie Phantasm, and they'd be like, the what? What the hell are you talking about? You know the movie with the tall guy and the spheres? I never heard of it. And then, like you had said, then they started coming out with sequels and stuff, and now there's been, 4 sequels, 5 movies altogether, so. And they're all pretty good. They kind of all follow along the same lines as what we've talked about before on this show with Child's Play, where Don Coscarelli, I want to say is how you pronounce his name. I'm probably butchering that. Not 100% sure. But he's been kind of involved with all of them along the way. At least I believe he has been anyway. So I just thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, this movie, I watched it again yesterday and still captured my attention the entire hour and a half throughout the movie. So
last summer, I think it was, I heard an interview or I read something about the director of this film and his story. Oh no, you know what? I listened to an interview with him in some like there was a horror where they were interviewing horror directors and writers, and his story is pretty cool. He basically wrote a screenplay like when he was in high school or like he was a teenager, and got it sold into Hollywood in the door because of that. I guess he that was, if I remember correctly, and so he got in really, really young, and then he started to, I forget the whole thing, but he got into the movie business and was starting to do some films, and I think he actually shot the film that he wrote or something like that, and then I don't think it worked out too well, but so they ended up where he was working for the studio, and then he was going to get this job where basically he was one of those guys that, like, the studio, and I can't remember which studio it was, they call on him and you're the guy who's going to direct it. So it's kind of like a real good position to be in for a director, even if you don't like the films you're doing, but it just kind of gets you going in the industry. And he threw it all away and said, forget it, I don't want to do that, I want to do my own thing. And he funded this movie Phantasm, wrote the script, and decided to do it all himself without the studio involved, and it ended up becoming what it became. And like you said, he did all the sequels, and he's done some other movies here and there too, but that kind of made him, this sort of horror cult director guy. And he may not be like a Spielberg or even a Carpenter for that matter. He's still like, he kind of etched his own destiny with this film franchise. And it's kind of funny too, because I saw this movie, I want to say it must have been 4 or 5 years ago now that I think back. And I remember I never saw it before, and for whatever reason, I was like, I gotta watch this. So I went, picked it up, watched it, and it really was, I was like, wow, that was pretty good, And so then I went and tracked down the sequels, and I think there was one of the sequels I couldn't find. And so I saw like maybe 2 of the sequels, and I didn't care for them. I didn't really care for them. And the second movie, Phantasm 2, if I remember correctly, that one was like a big deal. They really kind of pushed it like in the theaters, and they really, like, there was a lot of advertising backing it up. And I remember it was a big deal when it came out on video, and you know how video stores were back in the late 80s where they'd have posters and stuff out for the new movies. And but like the third one and the fourth one just kind of like, you know, I guess sort of just the fans knew about, because I don't think they went to theaters. And then like the fifth one was a big deal for us horror fans. I know that just because it was, you know, Angus Scrimm's last film. It was kind of neat to know that there was a new one, which I haven't seen that one yet either. I saw it like 4 or 5 years ago for the first time. I thought it was really good, and then I saw it maybe twice back then, and then I got to watch it again last night, the remastered version, which was remastered by J.J. Abrams' company. I think it's Bad Robot, and because he's a fan of the film. Yeah, it's an interesting, very strange movie. It's definitely you know, kind of off the wall a little bit. It's not even the story kind of is very strange. I mean, I guess we'll get into a little bit of that.
I think when this first came out in 1979, that this not being a slasher movie or based off of some sort of significant day of the year was probably part of the reason why it wasn't as successful as it probably was hoped to be at the movie theater and stuff. Even though I think it probably did okay at the theaters at time, but it was one of those things where, like you had said, you know, it's, you know, it came out and it kind of just got swept under the rug or forgotten about, and then it just built up a bit of a cult following over the years. What was that movie we were just talking about episode ago or a couple episodes ago, where that's where it gained all its fame because it was like on all the late night horror movie or horror broadcasts and stuff, and people saw it and saw it and saw it and then went, oh, I love that movie. I can't remember which one that was that we were talking about, but
Was it Curtains?
Oh yeah, I think it was Curtains. Yep.
Yeah, because Curtains was one of those movies where people saw, yeah, like you said, like saw it on cable when they were kids, or they saw like the trailer, like when they rented a movie, or they, you know, or whatever, and then it like disappeared for years because like once they didn't put it on DVD, so it was gone, and then so like everybody grew up and they're like, where's that movie with the old hag chasing the girl on the ice, you know, that kind of thing. Then it built this cult following because it was like such a big deal. Nobody could find it. Nobody knew what it was. And then all the internet blew up with like people asking like, you know, on forums, and then, oh yeah, what's this movie? So then it started, you know, people were ripping copies from their VHS, and if they were able to find a VHS, because that was even difficult to find. So yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, I think you're right. It kind of built up like that.
Yeah, this one, like I said, you know, I'd seen it in a hotel room, and I probably didn't see the whole thing. The only thing I do remember from that first time seeing it was just that little finger scene. But then, I don't know if I saw a commercial for it, or not a commercial, but like a trailer or something for it, like on some other like video or something. That could have very well been what it was, you know, when back in the day when you were renting horror movies from the video store and they have all these video or, you know, trailers at the beginning of them for like, oh, make sure you check out this movie coming to home video in November. And it could have been one of those things too, where I saw that and I was like, oh, hey, that's that movie. I remember that. Yeah, it's definitely, like you had said, a little bit off the wall of a storyline to it. Yeah.
Very, very strange storyline, you know. And it took a while to understand it. Like, you really kind of have to process like what's going on. But I think that's part of the movie, is it's like there's a lot of things unexplained about it, you know, where you just kind of have to say, okay, if you say so.
Well, some of that does get explained in some of the sequels.
Okay.
And I don't know that when this movie first came out, it was ever intended to get sequels. But it's basically what it is there are these two brothers, Jody and Michael, and their parents had recently passed away. And then the opening of the movie starts with a friend of Jody's. He's in the cemetery getting it on with this lady, and she stabs him. And then they go to his funeral, and you're introduced to the tall man, which is played by Angus Scrimm. And then you're also introduced to Reggie, who is this bald guy with a skullet who drives an ice cream truck. Michael is this little kid, and he keeps seeing these weird dwarf figures running around in the cemetery, and then they are chasing him in the woods at one point, and they're in his garage, and they're coming after him in the garage. So then it ends up being you have Jody and Michael and Reggie trying to figure out what's going on with the tall man who's the funeral director at this funeral home, and what's he doing in this whole story, and who these dwarves are, and what's going on with those guys. And the one thing I will say about these minions, the little dwarf characters in this movie, is even to this day, every time I see this movie, the first time those things come on screen, I'm like, those are freaking Jawas, man.
Yeah, they're kind of funny. It actually reminded me of the goblin type thing, or what are they called? Dwarves. I guess they're dwarves in Krampus. You'll have to watch Krampus again to know what I'm talking about if you don't remember. But there's a scene where the kid in Krampus looks out his window, and these like little things scurry behind the snowmen. And then when I saw this and the thing scurrying behind the tombstones, I'm like, oh yeah, it's like in Krampus. So that kind of reminded me of that. That's such a weird concept, though, like of what these things are, like what these dwarves were. I don't know, like what your thoughts are on that.
Well, so if you've only seen the first one, you haven't seen the other ones for a while, and they didn't really kind of quite go into it. I mean, they kind of did a little bit. But yeah, so basically what's happening is this guy's a funeral director, and this mysterious woman that kills this character at the beginning of the movie, well, it turns out it was him, and he has a portal to another world in the back of the funeral home or the mortuary or something. And basically what they're doing is they take the bodies of the people and they send them over to this other portal, and they do something to them in this other portal, and then they get shipped back in basically like a 55-gallon plastic drum. And then in that drum is these people have been turned into these little Jawa dwarves.
Wait, and they look like themselves too, because which I forgot about. But like in the beginning of the movie, this starts out with the two brothers, their friend gets killed, and then later on in the film, this little dwarf is attacking them and all this, and ends up in a car accident, and then they pull the hood down, and it happens to be their friend. So it's just a very strange idea. So basically, this tall man, as they call him, the Angus Scrimm character, he somehow turns his deceased bodies into living dwarves. So he like shrinks them down and then he uses them as some sort of slave labor in this other dimension, which is really strange. But the strangest part is that the kid figures that out, because there's a scene where he like sticks his head into the other dimension. And he sees all he sees is like basically this desert terrain and like a trail of these little Jawa guys. And I don't know what they're doing, if they're carrying something, I can't remember. But then when he's pulled out of the dimension by his brother, he like says, "Hey, I know what they're doing. They're turning them into dwarves so they can be slaves." And so how he figures it out, I don't know. But so anyhow, and that's I guess part of the charm of this movie is there's like a lot of stuff like that, kind of like that scene you're talking about with the finger, and then the finger turning into I don't know what it was, like a bat bug puppet thing.
Oh yeah, yep.
So it's like there's so many weird things like that are kind of charming and kind of cool and don't really make much sense, and you just have to kind of go with it. But at the same, and I think like here, like with the original one, maybe it's just the time period of how it was filmed. I just thought it was as kind of strange as the story was, like the way the movie was filmed and the music. That's another thing I really liked about this was the soundtrack. I just really kind of liked. I could look past all the weird stuff, like the things like with the story, just because of the other things of the movie, just the way it was shot and kind of the silliness of it and the weirdness of it. But like in the sequels, and I don't I guess this is another testament to why they didn't work for me, is I don't really even remember them very well. But I remember when I watched them thinking like, oh, this is not very good, or I don't really care for it. And it seemed like too, I don't know, it didn't have the tone of the original was gone. And that was like, so without that tone, it just didn't work for me. And so but the first movie has this kind of that weirdness, I guess maybe because it's 1979 and there's something about that era in filmmaking, whereas like you could definitely tell like the second one was a late 80s movie. It's got that more commercially looking vibe to it. It's a strange movie, but it's got sort of something about it that I think will hook a lot of horror fans if they haven't seen it already.
Well, I think that a lot of that kind of oddness of it comes from what we've already sort of talked about, where Don Coscarelli decided to make this movie. He had already made a movie called Kenny and Company, which is like a comedy movie. I haven't seen it, so I can't say if it's truly is a comedy or not. Some of the folks that were in this movie were also in that movie as well. And he had made Kenny and Company, and it wasn't successful. And so then he was like, I'm not doing too hot in this filmmaking business. And then he got the idea that, well, horror movies are easy to make, and they're always successful. Well, let's make a horror movie. And even though he was a fan of horror, at least that's what I've heard, they decided to make a movie. But instead of where a lot of these other horror movies came from the studio down, you're like, oh, you guys got to make a horror movie. And it's got to be about this or it's got to be about that. And, it's got to be done in 30 days. To where I think him and some of these other guys were like, hey, you guys want to make a horror movie? Yeah, let's make a horror movie. Cool, what should it be about? Let's make it about a funeral director. Oh, perfect. And let's put some dwarves in it. Awesome. And let's put alien stuff in it. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, it's very weird. And, and it's looking at like the movies that came out around like the 70s horror stuff. I think like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974, Halloween obviously a year before Phantasm. To me, those films, and The Exorcist, I know that was in the 70s somewhere. To me, those films kind of were far superior to this. Whereas Texas Chainsaw Massacre definitely feels like a B movie, in the sense that you can see there's no real studio behind it. And it's sort of the same. Chainsaw is very similar in the sense that it's Tobe Hooper getting a bunch of locals together to let's make a movie, kind of thing. I see that movie as far more classic in the sense that it just, although the acting isn't great, I think that the directing is so superb, and like the story and the way it comes across like just like a sheer nightmare. And it lived up, to its reputation, in my opinion, over years and years and years. Where this movie, I can see where it kind of falls a little bit deeper into the, to the more cult status horror film, where you have to have more of a passion for horror to kind of want to check something like this out, where Chainsaw is sort of like a staple in the genre. And this one's not quite as good as that, not as good as Halloween, not as good as The Exorcist, not as good as, a lot of these classics. But it kind of has its place, I guess, in sort of like the weird offbeat horror stuff. Cause, later films, you could tell kind of borrowed from it, some of the weirdness you can see in more supernatural films that came out in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, it's definitely one that you got to check out. Things I do like about it. I do like the weirdness. I like how it was shot. I like the soundtrack quite a bit. And I like the tall man. I thought he's very eerie, and he's very, he's very creepy, and, he kind of holds well as sort of an iconic horror character. You think of him as like this big giant guy, Undertaker guy. And I think he was very effective in it. But some of the things I don't like about this movie, some of the jumbly editing in this film, it just seems kind of strange how it bounces around, and the story is kind of so. You have to just kind of take it for what it is. But one thing I really thought was weird watching it again that I kind of forgot about was how the tall man turns into this hot blonde, has sex with people. That to me is very, very strange. Like, I didn't realize that, but like that was really weird, because that's like you're like, wait, what? What's happening?
The more I think about it, the more I am convinced that those are Jawas in this movie. Because
it could be.
He did have that portal that was opened up to this other planet. Now, I'm not sure if it was kind of like not only open to another planet, but also to another time, because anytime you watch a Star Wars movie, it does say at the very beginning, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So maybe when they transported from Earth to this other planet, they did go back a long time ago.
The Tatooine.
But yeah, because it was like a deserty planet.
It was.
So
maybe they were Jawas.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't end up with some droids. Could you imagine if C-3PO was in this movie? He'd freaking whining the entire time.
I could totally see him walking through the hallways of the mortuary, or like them getting chased by the tall man, and then R2-D2 turning around and blowing smoke at him to kind of get them away for a while, and so they can get their distance to the Millennium Falcon and fly away. Yeah, I could totally see that.
So this movie does have a couple of very iconic aspects to it that did continue out through all 5 of the sequels. Number 1 is, of course, the tall man.
Yeah.
Who is played by Angus Scrimm, and he is in all 5 of the movies. And then the other one is, while not nearly as recognizable as a hockey mask or machetes or a bladed glove or anything like that, but there is the bladed spheres that are in these movies that are pretty much synonymous with Phantasm.
And and they came out before the glove and the hockey mask.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting, because you'd think of, like, I remember when I saw the trailer for the sequel, and I saw the sphere floating around, I was thinking like, oh, yeah, that's just like probably like, okay, they're trying to come up with a new slasher. So they got this, Undertaker guy, and he's got a sphere with blades on it. Probably like his gimmick, just like Freddy's glove or whatever. But the reality was that came before it, which is kind of weird.
But the other thing that came from this movie, which I think is maybe outside of the only other movie I can think of that has a vehicle that is really recognizable from the movie, would be Jeepers Creepers has the, whatever you call that thing, the Creeper Mobile. I don't know what it's called. But this movie has that souped up muscle car, the Barracuda, that ended up being in, I think, every one of the sequels as well. And I know that I have actually seen, I think at Flashback Weekend a couple of times, in different vendor booths, they would have, you know, whatever year the car is. I don't know what year it was, 77 or whatever it was. Barracuda from Phantasm, you know, like a little Hot Wheels thing. I'm like, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, outside of, you know, true horror movies, of course, you had like the Munsters, Dracula, and stuff like that, but I can't think of another like true horror movie that had a vehicle that was associated with it.
Yeah.
So that's just something I thought was pretty cool about it.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat flick. You know, we missed the director was at the last time we were at where was it? At Flashback. He was there and we totally missed him.
Yeah, because I think we talked about this when we talked about it. Like, I knew he was gonna be there, but then I didn't think of it until after we had left, because the day, that Saturday before we had went, they were playing, I think it was the 4K version of...
That's right. Yeah, the remastered version, yeah.
Phantasm there, and I couldn't remember, and so I knew he was going to be there, but it was one of those things like, because yeah, I probably would have met him, because I love all of the Phantasm movies. It is kind of a goofy movie, but I mean, in all reality, a lot of the horror movies, you know, you don't ever really watch a horror movie and be like, oh man, there's a plot hole right there. Come on. I'm done. I'm not watching this anymore.
Yeah, there's quite a few strange little plot holes in this movie, but yeah, you have to let all of that go.
The biggest problem that I do have with this movie is with part of, it's not really a plot hole, but it's one of those things that they kind of happened a little bit in this movie where they would go from one scene to the next scene, and then somebody would just say something, and then you're like, oh, okay, so I guess that's what happened. But, you know, all this stuff happens, and then Michael and Reggie are sitting, hanging out together, and basically Reggie is telling them, oh, you must have just had a nightmare. You've been having those a lot since Jody died in a car crash. Like, wait, what? What happened?
Yeah, there's some stuff, that's for sure.
All right, well, I think the two of us give this one a thumbs up for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun one. If you haven't seen it, be sure to go check it out. And I would even say, you know, my personal recommendation would be, if you're going to watch one, you might as well watch all 5 of them.
See, and I don't know that I would agree with that. I think like, well, if you like the first one, you got to probably hunt down the rest of them and just watch them. Yeah, so in that sense. But I think depending on what you're looking for, you might not be as happy with the sequels. You might end up like me, where you're kind of disappointed with what came afterwards.
I do know that when you get to part 5, you do have to be a fan of the rest of them, because part 5 really is meant for the fans more than it is. Yeah, I mean, because if you're not a fan of the other ones, you're not going to like 5 at all. Because I mean, all of the characters are old. You know, I mean, the guy who played Reggie, whose name is actually Reggie, you know, he is 71 now. The guy who plays Michael, whose name is Michael, he's like 53 or something, or 52 or something like that. So, I mean, they are old people. Angus Scrimm was in it too, and he was like 82 or 83 or something when they filmed it, or 90 or something. We had talked about this. I think we made it to an undercover episode before, but where he really was, there was a couple of scenes where it was CGI'd with him walking around, but other than that, it was mainly like him, like, being immobile. But I mean, it's a good movie. It's just, it's really meant for fans of the movie. It's not going to be one of those things where it's going to revive the popularity of Phantasm by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I had heard he was offered, or somebody was, they were considering doing a remake of it, Phantasm, and I guess he was the director. In the interview I heard, I don't remember if this was before 5 or after or what, but I don't know if he was involved or if somebody wanted to, or if they're looking for the right person to do it, or I can't remember what it was. But this is one of those movies to me that would lend itself well to being remade. This is one that I wouldn't mind seeing remade, like some of the classics like Halloween or Chainsaw. To me, like the originals were too good, and I felt like they didn't need to be remade. But where this movie, I could say like, yeah, go ahead and remake it. See what you can do with it. Use the elements and go to town. So I'd be curious to see a remake of this.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to it if it was with the right people. That's for sure.
Yeah, somebody who liked horror and did not want to have any connection to modern day teenagers.
You don't want Anchor Bay to remake it, then, is what you're saying?
I don't want to see, I don't even know of any modern day teenagers, but I don't want to see the cast of whatever hot Disney TV show to be in this movie. That's all I know.
Well, I think we'll leave it there because that will be a perfect segue into our next episode for next week.
You are so right. Yeah, absolutely.